The FBI doesn't use the word link lightly. They use it when two names, two forensic trails, and one documented operation converge into something that can no longer be called coincidence. And in the case of Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman who has not been seen in over 100 days, that word appeared in their report alongside two specific names, Tommaso Cioni, Dominic Evans, and what the Bureau documented around those names does not just add a new angle to this investigation. It reconstructs the entire foundation of what happened in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona, on the night of the 31st of January 2026. That is where this documentary begins. Not with speculation, not with a Reddit thread or an anonymous tip, with the documented forensic and behavioral record that the FBI has been building since the first hour this case went federal. Every source used in this video is linked in the description below. Every confirmed fact will be labeled as confirmed. Every area still under active investigation will be identified as such. That line matters in a case that has been surrounded by noise from day one. Drop where you are watching from right now in the comments. City, country, time zone. People all over the world are following this case, and I want to know who is in this with me tonight. Now let's get into exactly what the FBI found and why it changes everything. It is 1:47 a.m. on the 1st of February 2026. The Catalina foothills neighborhood of Tucson is completely still. The desert air sits flat and cold, no traffic, no movement. And then a figure steps into frame on Nancy Guthrie's doorbell camera. All black clothing, nitro gloves on both hands, a 2.5-liter Ozark Trail Hiker backpack, the kind sold at Walmart for under $30 strapped to their back, a ski mask covering everything except the eyes, and in one hand a flashlight held in the mouth, casting a pale glow across the porch as the figure moves toward the lens. What happens next takes seconds. The figure reaches for foliage from a nearby plant, covers the camera, and the feed goes dark. At that exact moment, 1:47 a.m., confirmed by the Pima County Sheriff's Department, Nancy's Pacemaker application on her phone registered a disruption event. The camera went offline at 1:47, the device registered disruption at 1:47, not within the same minute, the same recorded second. That synchronization is not a detail investigators noted and filed away. It is, according to forensic analysts who have spoken publicly on this case, the anchor point of the entire timeline. Two systems, one timestamp, and the operational precision that timestamp implies tells you everything about the level of planning that preceded it. But here's the detail that most coverage of this case walked right past, and the detail that the FBI's behavioral analysis has been treating as critical since the second week of the investigation. One of the doorbell camera images released publicly by the FBI was captured on a different, earlier date than the others. A source with direct knowledge of the investigation confirmed this to Fox News Digital. One image shows the same masked figure on that same porch but without the backpack, a prior visit, a reconnaissance trip. Someone had stood at that exact door, in that exact position, before the night of January 31st. The FBI asked neighbors to check their home security systems going back through the entire month of January, specifically flagging the night of January 11th because the pre-operational window was not hours. It was weeks. You are not looking at a crime of opportunity. You are looking at a rehearsed operation. And the question the FBI's new report is built around is the same question this documentary is going to answer layer by layer. Who built it? Who ran it? And what is the documented link between the two names the Bureau keeps returning to? Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications. This channel posts only when there is something verified and confirmed to report. Every update on this case is sourced, structured, and built to give you the clearest possible picture of an active federal investigation. Hit subscribe. You will not regret it. The FBI has been processing DNA evidence recovered from Nancy Guthrie's home, including a sample sent from a private Florida lab, to federal analysts who are applying advanced technology to isolate and identify the biological profile. According to sources familiar with the investigation, as many as 5 laboratories across the country are working different elements of the forensic record simultaneously. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos publicly stated that separating and isolating the relevant strands could take up to 6 additional months, which tells you something specific about the complexity and the volume of biological material recovered from that scene. A gray Range Rover was processed for evidence by FBI forensic teams and Pima County Sheriff's deputies at a restaurant parking lot in Tucson on the 13th of February 2026 and subsequently towed. The vehicle is part of the active forensic record. A black glove was recovered approximately 1.5 miles southeast of Nancy's home during an FBI neighborhood search on February 12th, and the Bureau confirmed it was seeking a DNA match from that item. Each of those data points, the prior scouting visit, the synchronized timestamp, the DNA analysis, the vehicle, the glove feeds into a behavioral and forensic map the FBI has been constructing since the first 72 hours. And that map, piece by piece, has been pulling 2 names into sharper focus. Not because of public speculation, not because of appearance-based comparisons, because of documented, traceable connections that the FBI's new report now addresses directly. What those connections actually show and why they change the geometry of this entire investigation is exactly where this documentary goes next. But before you understand what the FBI found, you have to understand who they found it around. Because the selection of Nancy Guthrie was not random, it was calculated. And the calculation started with the woman herself. Before you understand what the FBI found, you need to understand who they found it around. Because in cases built on this level of operational precision, the target is never accidental. The target is the starting point. And if you want to understand every decision made on the night of the 31st of January 2026, you have to start with the woman at the center of it. Nancy Ellen Long was born on the 27th of January 1942 in Fort Wright, Kentucky, a small community just south of Cincinnati across the Ohio River. She graduated from the University of Kentucky. She married Charles Errol Guthrie on the 28th of December 1963. Charles was a mining engineer. His work took them across the world, including a period in Melbourne, Australia, where their youngest daughter, Savannah, was born. By the early 1970s, the family had settled in Tucson, Arizona, into a home in the Catalina foothills near Campbell Avenue and Skyline Drive. Nancy described the city simply, the air, the quality of life, the way the desert moved at dusk. She never left. Then in 1988, Charles Guthrie suffered a fatal cardiac event during a work trip to Mexico. He was 49 years old, Nancy was 46. She did not leave Tucson, she did not collapse. She raised 3 children, Savannah, Annie, and Charles Cameron, largely on her own. She went on to work in public relations at the University of Arizona for nearly 2 decades. She built a life that was full, structured, and deeply routine-driven. Church every Sunday, her garden, her porch in the desert evenings, a community that knew her name. By January 2026, that routine had a specific medical shape. Nancy had limited mobility. She required daily medication for a chronic cardiac condition medication that Sheriff Chris Nanos stated publicly could be fatal if missed beyond a 2-4 hour window. She had a pacemaker with a connected monitoring application on her phone. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos said it on the record, plainly with no ambiguity. She could not walk 50 yards by herself. That statement was not made carelessly. It was made to establish, on the record, the precise level of physical dependency that defined Nancy's daily existence in January 2026. And when you hold that statement next to the forensic evidence from the night she disappeared, the pre-operational scouting visit, the synchronized timestamps, the 4 1-minute window a specific question emerges. One, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit has been working to answer since the first week of the investigation. Someone knew her routine, someone knew her camera system, someone knew her medical profile, someone knew her financial standing, and someone knew that the combination of all four made her a viable, low-resistance target for an operation that had clearly been months in the planning. Ask yourself this: what kind of access does that knowledge require? Not the access of a distant observer, not the access of someone who studied her from a public record, the access of someone who had been inside that world, someone embedded close enough to map every variable without raising a single flag. Tommaso Cioni, Annie Guthrie's husband and Nancy's son-in-law, had been an AP biology teacher at Basis Oro Valley in Tucson for more than 15 years. He was Italian-born. He had been part of the Guthrie family orbit for approximately 2 decades. He was the person who drove Nancy home on the night of January 31st. He was the last confirmed person to see her alive. That is not an accusation. It is a documented fact that sits at the center of the FBI's behavioral timeline. And the new report keeps returning to the question that connects Cioni to Dominic Evans and to everything the FBI has now documented, is not whether he drove her home. It is what happened in the hours that followed, and more importantly, how long before that night someone had been preparing for them. At 5:32 p.m. on the 31st of January 2026, Nancy Guthrie took an Uber to her daughter Annie's home for dinner and a games night. That detail matters. She did not drive herself. She arrived as a passenger, cheerful and present, the kind of grandmother who shows up on a Saturday evening ready to play games at the table. Investigators later spoke to the Uber driver at length. They reviewed the in-vehicle footage. Nancy's demeanor was completely unremarkable. A regular pickup, a regular drop-off, nothing of substance to report. That is the last image the world has of Nancy Guthrie going about her life without knowing what was coming. At approximately 9:48 p.m., Tommaso Cioni drove her home. The New York Times reported he waited 2 minutes to confirm she was safely inside before driving away. At 9:50 p.m., the garage door closed. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos said it plainly at a press conference days later. That moment, the automated closure of the garage door was the final confirmed indicator of her safety. The neighborhood went still, and the clock began moving towards something that had already been set in motion weeks earlier. 4 hours passed. Nothing visibly happened. But the FBI's forensic reconstruction tells a different story about those 4 hours, one built on pre-positioned elements, disabled sightlines, and a figure who already knew exactly where to stand when the moment came. At 1:47 a.m., the Nest doorbell camera disconnected, and the same second that feed went dark, Nancy's Pacemaker application registered a disruption from her phone. 1 second, 2 systems. 1 timestamp. The operational significance of that synchronization, what it tells investigators about coordination, about rehearsal, about the presence of more than one actor, is something this documentary will return to in detail. But right now, hold that number 147, because everything that follows is measured from it. Approximately 25 minutes after the camera disconnected, a second surveillance camera on the property detected movement but captured no usable footage. That gap is forensically significant. It means the operation was still active inside the residence more than 20 minutes after the primary lens went dark. Someone was inside that home for at least that duration. Moving, working, executing a plan that had assigned roles, pre-cleared entry points, and a subject whose nightly routine had been studied in enough detail to know precisely where she would be at 1:47 inches the morning. Former homicide detectives and law enforcement analysts who have spoken publicly on this case have pointed to the operational window as one of the most telling forensic signatures in the evidence record. Professional forced entry scenarios are measured in minutes, rarely exceeding 10. The window here was significantly longer. That kind of extended timeline inside a residence does not come from improvisation. It comes from preparation, from a plan that accounted for variables in advance, from people who had studied what they were walking into. At 2:28 a.m., the pacemaker application on Nancy's phone showed the device had disconnected from her phone entirely. Not because her heart stopped, because she was being transported beyond the application's functional range. She was alive at 2:28 a.m., moving. And the digital trail, the only trail that had been silently recording everything, went with her into the dark. At 7:15 a.m. on February 15th, Tucson law enforcement confirmed they were deploying advanced Bluetooth detection technology in an active effort to locate Nancy's pacemaker signal. Because that device does not stop recording. Every physiological reading since 2:28 a.m. is stored inside it, waiting. And the FBI knows exactly what recovering it would mean for this investigation. The morning of February 1st, the alarm did not come from the family first. It came from Nancy's church. She attended a regularly streamed Sunday service. When she did not appear, someone made a call. At 11 a.m., friends contacted the family with concerns. At 11:56 a.m., relatives confirmed she was missing. At 12:03 p.m., a 911 call was placed. Deputies arrived approximately 10 minutes later. What they found inside that home and on the front doorstep told them immediately that Nancy Guthrie had not walked out on her own. Her phone was still there. Her daily cardiac medication was still there. Forensic trace evidence was recovered from the front doorstep, subsequently confirmed through laboratory analysis as consistent with Nancy Guthrie's biological profile. DNA from an unknown individual was also recovered inside the residence. The Pima County Sheriff's Department declared the property a crime scene. Sheriff Nano stated publicly he believed Nancy had been the victim of a targeted abduction. Not a random act, not opportunistic, targeted, specific, planned. Ask yourself this. Every element of that night, the timing, the camera neutralization, the extended operational window, the transport before dawn, required knowledge that does not come from a public record. It required someone who knew the routine, the layout, the medical profile, the camera system. Someone close enough to have mapped every variable without raising a single flag. That question, who held that knowledge, and how the FBI documented the chain, connecting it to two specific names, is exactly where this investigation goes next. But the forensic record from that night is not finished telling its story yet, because what investigators pulled from that scene and the days that followed introduced something nobody in the initial response had anticipated. Every operation leaves a signature, a pattern so specific, so deliberate, that when forensic analysts pull it apart layer by layer, it stops looking like a crime and starts looking like an engineering problem someone spent weeks solving. The night of January 31st into February 1st left exactly that kind of signature. Start with the camera. Nancy's home had a Google Nest doorbell, powered active motion sensing. Nancy did not have a paid subscription. Without it, footage is not saved. When motion is detected, the feed streams to Google's servers for processing, and for non-paying users, it is marked for deletion, no stored video, no cloud backup, no redundant copy a subpoena could easily reach. Someone knew that, not guessed, knew. Because the figure who appeared at 1:47 a.m. did not scan the roofline, did not pause at the doorbell unit, walked directly to it, one motion. The foliage placed over the lens was taken from a specific plant at a specific angle. That level of precision does not come from a first visit. What the planner did not account for was what the FBI and Google's engineers could still recover. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed investigators worked for days pulling footage from residual data in Google's back-end systems, data marked for deletion but not yet fully overwritten. Digital forensics experts explained publicly that Google performed forensic analysis on the servers themselves, recovering video that was never saved but had been processed. That footage was released on the 10th of February 2026, the most significant public development in the case to that point. The camera was neutralized, the data survived. The footage confirmed what investigators already suspected. The FBI described the subject as male, approximately 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches tall, average build, full-face ski mask, black clothing, nitrile gloves, a holstered handgun, a flashlight held in the mouth, its pale glow catching the infrared sensor as the figure moved toward the lens. Sheriff Nanos told CBS News the clothing and mask were consistent with items available at Walmart, a complete kit assembled to be generic and disposable. But the footage only shows the front door. What the forensic record from inside the residence fills in is a different layer entirely. The Nest camera was physically removed after the abduction gone when deputies arrived that morning. That is not the behavior of someone who covered a lens and walked away. That is someone who understood the forensic implications of the hardware itself. Retired FBI Special Agent Steve Moore stated publicly that the single strand of hair recovered from the residence is almost certainly a fraction of the full biological evidence picture, arguing the scene would conservatively yield at least 10 additional undisclosed pieces of trace evidence. That assessment aligns with Sheriff Nanos confirming 5 separate laboratories are actively processing different elements of the forensic record simultaneously. That volume of parallel laboratory work does not happen for a simple scene. It happens when the biological material is layered, complex, and carrying multiple profiles that require separation and advanced analysis to isolate. The camera system was studied in advance, the hardware was removed, the biological evidence is still being processed across 5 labs. Every one of those details points toward the same conclusion the FBI's behavioral unit reached in the first week. This operation required insider knowledge, specific, intimate, embedded knowledge, and that knowledge traces directly back to the 2 names this investigation will not let go of. 2 names. That is where the public focus of this investigation has been concentrated since the 2nd week. And before this documentary goes any further into the forensic and behavioral record the FBI has been building, both names need to be placed on the record accurately, completely, and with every confirmed fact clearly separated from what remains unproven. Tommaso Cioni is 50 years old, Italian-born, and has lived in Arizona for nearly 2 decades. He is married to Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, and together they have 1 child. He has taught AP Biology and Science at Basis Oro Valley School in Tucson for more than 15 years. Annie described him in a 2013 interview as her greatest creative inspiration, someone who, in her words, writes poetry with his lifestyle. By every visible measure, he was embedded deeply into the Guthrie family's daily world. He knew the home, he knew the routines, and on the night of the 31st of January 2026, he was the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. That fact placed him under immediate public scrutiny. On February 4th, former News Nation journalist Ashley Banfield reported that a law enforcement source had identified Cioni as a prime suspect. The Pima County Sheriff's Department denied it immediately. On the 16th of February 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos issued a formal statement clearing the entire Guthrie family, all siblings and all spouses, as possible suspects. His words were direct. The family had been ruled out within the first few days, had been fully cooperative, and were victims. He called suggestions otherwise not only wrong, but cruel. That is the confirmed record on Tommaso Cioni. Cleared, cooperative, a victim's family member. Dominic Aaron Lee Evans is Cioni's longtime friend and former bandmate. The 2 co-founded the Tucson-based band Early Black in 2007, Cioni on bass, Evans on drums, alongside guitarist Walter Gonsalves. Evans spoke with investigators approximately 1 week into the case for around 40 minutes and has not been contacted by authorities since, according to the New York Times. He publicly denied any involvement. Sheriff Nanos expressed sympathy for Evans publicly, suggesting he consider legal action for the treatment he received online. Public records surfaced online showing prior charges in Pima County connected to Evans, including burglary and related offenses. Those records have not been officially confirmed by law enforcement as part of any active evidentiary inquiry in this case. So here is where the documented record actually sits. Both men were examined. Both men exist within the investigative orbit because of their proximity to the Guthrie family. Neither has been charged. Neither has been named as a suspect by law enforcement. And yet the FBI's behavioral analysis, the documented forensic and communication mapping that the new report addresses, keeps returning to the connection between them. Not their appearances, not public speculation. The documented link between their networks, their communications, and the pre-operational timeline the Bureau has been reconstructing since the first week of this investigation. What that link actually shows and why it is the structural center of the FBI's new report is exactly what this documentary examines next. Follow the money. It is one of the oldest principles in federal investigation. And in the Nancy Guthrie case, the financial trail did not just reveal motive, it revealed architecture, the kind of structure that does not appear in a missing persons case, the kind that appears when someone has been planning a financial extraction alongside a physical one. The ransom notes arrived fast. Within days of the February 1st disappearance, multiple media outlets, including TMZ and local Arizona station KGUN9, received messages demanding payment in Bitcoin for Nancy Guthrie's safe return. The first notes demanded $4 million with a deadline of February 5th. Later communications escalated the demand to $6 million with a final deadline of February 9th at 5 p.m. local time. A specific public Bitcoin wallet address was included in the messages. That deadline passed with no confirmed payment from the family. But investigators were not watching the deadline. They were watching the wallet. On the 10th of February, 2026, the same day the FBI released the doorbell, camera footage blockchain data confirmed activity in the Bitcoin wallet listed in the ransom note. A transaction of less than $300 was recorded. The origin of that transfer has not been publicly disclosed. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings released a video statement on February 7th saying they had received the message and would pay, while also requesting proof of life over concerns about AI-generated fabrications. A second ransom note was conclusively determined to be a hoax and led directly to the arrest of its sender. A third note, reported by TMZ in April, was the first to reference a specific location claiming Nancy had been seen in Sonora, Mexico, and was also the first to allege she had died. Investigators have not confirmed any of those claims. Here is what the financial forensics layer tells the FBI, independent of the ransom notes themselves. Bitcoin is traceable. Every transaction is recorded permanently on a public blockchain ledger. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer stated publicly that blockchain analysis could identify individuals associated with the wallet address, and that even an attempt to convert cryptocurrency to standard currency would leave a traceable record. The ransom note architecture, the escalating demands, the cryptocurrency routing, the multi-outlet distribution is not the behavior of a single impulsive actor. It is structured, deliberate, and it feeds directly into the behavioral and financial mapping the FBI has been layering onto the two names at the center of this investigation. That mapping, what it revealed, and the moment the investigation came closest to breaking open before hitting a wall it did not anticipate, is exactly where this case goes next. This is the chapter the title is built around, not the noise, not the social media speculation. The actual documented forensic record the FBI has been constructing since the first week and what the new findings reveal about the architecture of this case start with the DNA. It is the thread that forensic analysts, retired federal agents, and laboratory specialists have all pointed to as the most consequential unresolved element of this investigation. And the picture it paints is more complex than any single headline has captured. Multiple DNA samples were recovered from Nancy Guthrie's home and surrounding areas. Previous samples either returned no match in CODIS, the FBI's national database of DNA from criminal offenders, or were classified as mixed, meaning they contain genetic material from more than one individual. Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly that the mixture could contain profiles from several people, which makes isolating a single usable profile significantly more difficult. The sample was initially sent to a private Florida laboratory used by the Pima County Sheriff's Office. When that lab encountered challenges, the FBI was asked to take over advanced analysis, a request that was made 2 months before the update became public, according to FBI Assistant Director for Public Affairs Ben Williamson, who clarified on record that this was not new evidence but an ongoing process. C.C. Moore, a leading investigative genetic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, stated publicly that based on how long the processing has taken, the mixture likely contains DNA from 3 or more people. Her assessment? Nancy's profile plus at least 2 unknowns. That framing is significant. It is consistent with the behavioral analysis finding of more than one actor present inside that residence during the 4-1-minute operational window. Then there is the glove. Of approximately 16 gloves recovered by investigators in various locations near the home, the FBI identified one as distinct, recovered nearly 2 miles from the residence, appearing to visually match the nitrile gloves worn by the subject in the surveillance footage. The FBI confirmed a DNA profile was extracted from that glove. The profile did not match any individual already considered part of the investigation, according to an official statement. Lab analysis on additional evidence remains ongoing. In March 2026, investigators introduced genetic genealogy testing to work on the unidentified DNA samples, the same methodology that cracked cold cases previously considered unsolvable by working backward through family trees to identify individuals who have never personally submitted a sample to any law enforcement database. That process is now actively running on the biological material recovered from this scene, the vacant property. Investigators examined a vacant home near Nancy's residence that experts publicly described as a possible pre-abduction surveillance point, a location from which someone could monitor her movements, her schedule, her visitors, without raising any visible alarm. Combined with the confirmed prior reconnaissance visit to her doorstep, and the FBI's specific request for neighbors' footage going back to January 11th, the behavioral picture the Bureau is assembling is not of a reactive crime, it is of a studied one. What that study required and who had the specific access to conduct it is the question the FBI's behavioral and forensic mapping keeps returning to, and the answer to that question is not sitting in a laboratory. It is sitting in the documented connection between 2 men, a family, and a network of access that stretches back nearly 2 decades. There is a specific kind of momentum that builds inside a major federal investigation when everything appears to be converging. The evidence is mounting, the forensic processing is active, the leads are coming in, and then the moment arrives that every investigator dreads the lead that looks like the breakthrough and isn't. On the night of the 13th of February, 2026, that moment arrived publicly and visibly. Just before 9 p.m., a convoy of 10 to 12 unmarked law enforcement vehicles, SWAT teams, forensic units, FBI agents, and deputies from multiple surrounding agencies converged on a residence approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home near East Orange Grove Road and North First Avenue. Roads were blocked, media crews set up at the perimeter. The Pima County Sheriff's Department posted on social media confirming law enforcement activity was related to the Guthrie case. A statement, they said, was forthcoming. Then, just before midnight, a second post appeared. At the FBI's request, no additional information was available. The scene ran through the night. A gray Range Rover was searched, its trunk sealed, and towed from the parking lot of a restaurant on Northstone Avenue. At least 3 individuals were detained across 2 connected locations, including a man stopped during a traffic stop in a white van. Photographs confirmed handcuffs. By morning, Sheriff Nanos confirmed it on the record. The operation had been executed on a search warrant. No arrests were made. No signs of Nancy Guthrie were found at the property. The individuals detained were released. The FBI declined to comment. By this point, more than 13,000 tips had been submitted to the FBI alone. The Pima County Sheriff's Department had received at least 18,000 additional tips through its own channels. Each one being assessed, each one screened, a 2-4-hour command post running continuous triage on every call that came in. Former FBI hostage negotiator Chip Massey told CNN that the February 13th operation, despite producing no arrest, was an encouraging sign. The investigators were following every verifiable lead aggressively. The absence of an arrest did not mean the absence of progress. It meant the picture was still being assembled. What does that look like from where you are sitting right now? Over 30,000 combined tips, a multi-agency SWAT operation, 3 detentions and 0 charges, and still no name on a warrant. Ask yourself what that pattern tells you about the complexity of what the FBI is actually dealing with, and about the one piece of this case that no tip line, no search warrant, and no traffic stop has yet resolved. While the SWAT operations ran and the DNA laboratories processed their samples, the FBI was doing something else simultaneously, something quieter, something that required a helicopter flying slow and low in grid patterns over the Catalina foothills at night, and a piece of technology that most people have never heard of, a signal sniffer. That is the official term. It is a device that uses an amplifier and a high-gain directional antenna to detect and identify low-power Bluetooth signals, including the specific signal emitted by a pacemaker. The FBI mounted one to the underside of a law enforcement helicopter and began flying search patterns over the areas investigators had identified as priorities. Fox News Digital confirmed a low-flying helicopter was spotted near Nancy Guthrie's home as early as February 4th, just 3 days after her disappearance. Here is the forensic logic behind it. Nancy's pacemaker is equipped with Bluetooth low-energy technology, a power setting engineered so the device runs for multiple years without a battery change. That device does not need to be paired to a phone to function. It does not need a Wi-Fi connection. It does not need anything external. It runs continuously. And every 2 to 3 minutes, it transmits a Bluetooth signal carrying a unique identifier, a MAC address, specific to Nancy Guthrie's device, and no other. David Kennedy, a former NSA hacker and the inventor of the specific signal sniffer deployed in this investigation, told CBS News that while standard Bluetooth low energy has a 10 to 15 foot radius, with signal amplifiers and high-gain antennas mounted on aircraft, that detection range extends to several hundred feet. Kennedy himself tested a modified drone version and extended detection to approximately 800 feet. The helicopter deployment was designed to cover large geographic areas quickly, flying grid patterns, flagging any signal that matched the MAC address on file. Dr. Lawrence Epstein, System Director of Electrophysiology for Northwell Health, confirmed publicly that even after Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from her phone app, the device itself continued functioning exactly as designed. It does not require that connection to operate. It keeps sending its signal. What that means for the investigation is precise and significant. That signal is still out there, every 2 to 3 minutes, waiting for a receiver to come within range. That is not a metaphor. That is the operational reality the FBI's search assets have been working toward since the first week of February. The device is the most honest witness in this entire case. It has no legal representation. It cannot be coached or influenced. It records and transmits according to its engineering, and the data embedded in its transmission history, every physiological reading, every location transition since 2:28 a.m. on February 1st is recoverable the moment a compatible receiver gets close enough. Ask yourself what it means that 100 days into this investigation, that signal has not been found. It means the person who knows where Nancy Guthrie is has kept her beyond the reach of every helicopter, every drone, every grid search the FBI has run. And it means the most consequential development in this case will not come from a laboratory. It will come from a conversation with the one person who has the answer no forensic tool has yet reached. This is where the case stands today, not where the headlines placed it, not where the speculation threads tried to take it. Where it actually stands based on verified sources, confirmed forensic findings, and the documented investigative record as of May 2026, over 100 days. No arrest, no named suspect, no confirmed location. The combined reward in this case stands at over $1.2 million, $1 million of it posted directly by the Guthrie family for their mother's safe return. The FBI's contribution brings it to that total. That number has sat unclaimed for over 3 months. The FBI has received more than 13,000 tips through its 2 4-hour command post. The Pima County Sheriff's Department received at least 18,000 additional tips through its own channels. Everyone screened, every credible lead actioned, and still no resolution. The forensic record is active, multiple DNA profiles recovered from the scene, a mixed sample containing genetic material from more than one individual still being processed across 5 laboratories simultaneously. Genetic genealogy testing introduced in March 2026 to work backward through family trees and identify individuals who have never submitted a sample to any law enforcement database. The glove recovered nearly 2 miles from Nancy's home, visually consistent with what the suspect wore, carrying a DNA profile that did not match anyone already connected to the investigation, still in analysis. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed in the 5th of May 2026 appearance that the FBI was kept out of the investigation for days in the early stages and could have been more helpful earlier, including with DNA testing. That friction between the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department was publicly confirmed. NewsNation journalist Brian Entin, who has covered this case from day one, reported in early May that coordination between the 2 agencies has since significantly improved. Sheriff Nanos confirmed investigators remain confident the case can be solved. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer raised publicly in May 2026 the question of whether Tommaso Cioni still works at Basis Oro Valley, a question that has not been formally answered. Her remarks triggered another wave of public attention. Investigators, however, continue to stress the investigation remains active, evidence-driven, and ongoing. Here is what the full documented picture shows. A pre-planned operation, a prior reconnaissance visit confirmed, a synchronized timestamp that anchors the entire forensic timeline, mixed DNA from multiple individuals still being processed, a pacemaker signal the FBI has been flying grid patterns to locate, a financial trail built around cryptocurrency, a behavioral and forensic link between 2 men that the FBI's analysis keeps returning to, and 1 woman, 84 years old, who has not been seen since. A garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. on the 31st of January, 2026. The FBI has the evidence, they have the forensic map, they have the tools. What they need is the one development, a DNA match, a signal detection, a tip that clears the threshold, that turns this documented architecture into a direction, a road, a location, an answer. If you know anything about this case, anything at all, the FBI tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. That number's in the description below. Use it. Subscribe to this channel right now. Every confirmed update on this case will be posted the moment it clears verification. Not speculated, Not sourced from anonymous posts. Confirmed, sourced. The same standard this documentary was held to from the first frame to this one. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because based on where this investigation stands today, the next development is coming. Nancy Guthrie has been gone for over 100 days. She deserves every eye, every tip, and every second of continued attention this case receives. Keep her name active. Keep this investigation visible. That is how cases like this get solved.